Hello and welcome on this Thursday evening, November the 12th. I'm Bryan Houston. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports Spreecast. I'm doing this in the dark today because this continues the long national nightmare that has become the Dallas Cowboys season. They've lost six in a row since losing Tony Romo to a broken collarbone. And the question becomes, will they lose seven in a row when they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend? Tampa Bay homer Matthew Postins, who covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for several years, is joining us now. He's the Cowboys beat writer for Rattle and Hum Sports. And so, of course, he thinks that the Tampa Bay Bucks walk on hallowed ground as it is. And so the question is, first of all, Matthew, thanks very much for being here. I hope you don't mind me working by candlelight tonight.
No, not at all.
This is just not going to be a good night. I can tell already the way this is working out. All right. Question number one. I hope that we can maintain a broadcast strong enough to do this, but Des Bryant's head exploded today during media session, and he went off on a 15-minute rant. What can you tell us about what went on there?
There's a lot of different reporting out there on exactly what transpired. I took a look at the clip of at least some of the rant in the locker room earlier today, and the clip that I saw, it didn't seem to be directed at anybody in particular. It seemed like he was just talking to air at that point. I mean, he was quite vocal. There were a few swear words thrown in there here and there, but he didn't seem to be directing what I saw at anybody in particular. Um, Needed Jason Witten and Jason Garrett to get him out of the locker room, to get him removed from the situation. Now, earlier in the day, it had been reported by a couple of different outlets that uh, the disagreement came from something that Jean-Jacques Taylor of ESPN had written. Uh, I don't know if there's any particular truth to that. It's also been reported that the N word might have been involved. No, the media around the Cowboys that were in the locker room that day denied that that word was ever used, but there's no way for me to corroborate that either. Um, it seems to have died down a little bit at this point, with Des Bryant tweeting out about 7 hours ago, if you're going to tell something, tell the whole thing. I'm done with the situation. I hope everyone is having a great day. So I'm not entirely sure if we're going to find out for sure exactly what happened in the locker room today, but it certainly underscores the frustration that this team has right now. A team that some people felt had potential Super Bowl aspirations has now lost six games in a row and appears to be on the brink of being just completely irrelevant in this race for the postseason.
Yeah, and it's just what you just said. Basically, when you're losing, everything seems to be exaggerated, amplified, magnified, however you want to put it.
Hmm.
This Cowboys team is in desperate trouble as they get ready to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend. They've lost six in a row. At the time that Tony Romo went down with the broken collarbone, the prayer was that they could get out of the next 6 to 7 weeks with a 500 record. Obviously, that is not going to happen. They're not even going to come close to that. The question is, they got one more ball game to win before Romo comes back. Do they have a prayer of winning this ball game this weekend based on the evidence you've seen up to this point?
Based on the evidence up to this point, I think they do have a chance to win. I've always kind of felt like throughout this process of these 6 or 7 games without Tony Romo that all of these games, with the exception of Seattle and New England, were 50-50 games, and the Seattle game actually did end up turning out to be a 50-50 game for them. Based on what I saw last week, especially from the offense and the growth that we saw with Matt Castle at quarterback, I think there's a chance they can beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road on Sunday. The Buccaneers are a better team than you think. Jameis Winston has had this sort of up and down rookie season that you would expect from a rookie starting quarterback. But from what we've seen from him, when he's playing well, that whole offense plays pretty well, and they can do some very damaging things to your defense. But when they're not playing well, they have a very hard time moving the football. Therefore, they have a very hard time possessing the ball, and they put their defense in unfortunate situations. So um, they're a typical Lovie Smith team. They're disciplined and they're well coached, and they try to put themselves in good positions. to win the game. That's going to be a contingent quite a bit on Jameis Winston and what kind of pressure the Cowboys defense can put on Jameis Winston.
And based on what you saw from the Cowboys on the defensive line putting pressure or not putting pressure on Sam Bradford against the Philadelphia Eagles this past weekend, the only guy that seems to be able to get any pressure on anyone is Greg Hardy. Beyond that, I talk about Cole Beasley being MIA, T. Will being MIA, but it looks like the rest of the defensive line has been kind of missing in action for the last 6 weeks as well.
Yeah, with the exception of the first game Hardy played against New England, this defensive line, outside of Greg Hardy, has not put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I think they put up 5 sacks against the Patriots that first game, and their sack total has declined steadily since then. It's hard to put your finger on what the problem is, because when you have a player like Hardy on the field, theoretically that's going to cause your offense to have to, put a guy and a half, sometimes 2 guys to block Hardy, and theoretically that opens up opportunities for the rest of your pass rush to get to the quarterback, because you're primarily dealing with one-on-one matchups. That you look at that from that theory, that means that the rest of these guys, Tyrone Crawford, Randy Gregory, Jeremy Mincey, whoever else is on the field, they're not winning those one-on-one matchups the way they need to in order to get to the quarterback. And when you can find a way to slow down Greg Hardy with double teams, and then you can still win those one-on-one matchups with those other pass rushers if you're the offense, then that's going to give your quarterback time to throw the football. And as that game went on against Philadelphia last Sunday night, that's exactly what we saw. We saw a team that steadily had problems getting a rush on the passer, because the Eagles made adjustments at halftime to slow Hardy down and made enough adjustments to where they could win the one-on-one matchups with the other pass rushers as well.
Talking about that, I mean, what's the difference though? I mean, why have DeMarcus Lawrence and Tyrone Crawford and some of these guys who played so well last year, Mincey? What's happened to these guys? I mean, what's changed?
Well, some of it can be tape. I mean, for guys especially like Tyrone Crawford, there wasn't a lot of tape on those guys last year from a offensive coordinator standpoint to scheme appropriately against them. There's a lot more tape out there on Tyrone Crawford now, because up until last year, Crawford really hadn't played that much. So teams are probably scheming him a little bit better inside. Mincey missed a little time in training camp. Wasn't entirely happy with his role to begin this season. You wouldn't think that would have a lot of impact on where he's at now, but perhaps it is. It's really hard to say. It's the way the Cowboys want their pass rush to work is they want waves of guys getting to the quarterback, and when you're not winning the one-on-one matchups, when your best pass rusher is getting double teamed, those waves just aren't going to come. And I think increasingly the Cowboys seem to be a little less reticent to blitz the quarterback with their linebackers and with their secondary, because as this 6-game losing streak has gone on, their propensity for giving up bigger plays has gone up steadily with each loss.
Okay, sorry about that. Just trying to get some pictures for you to show you some of the defensive linemen who have not played in these ball games, or at least there's no evidence that they played in these ball games. Tell me what you know about Sean Lee's availability for this game. He had a concussion this past weekend. Is he going to be able to play, or is that just going to add more to this long, miserable nightmare that has been the Cowboys' defense?
Well, obviously, since he had a concussion on Sunday, he's going through the concussion protocol. Final injury report comes out on Friday, so it's not clear how available he'll be for Sunday. Obviously, he has to pass the protocol first. The doctors have to physically clear him in order to be able to play. Then the Cowboys have to feel comfortable with him being on the field, and to some degree, Lee has to feel comfortable with that too. So we're probably a day or two away from having a firm understanding of when he's going to be available for the Cowboys. If he's available on Sunday and he plays with a clear head, obviously that changes the dynamic of what they can do on defense. if Lee's not able to play, given the fact that Anthony Hitchens is banged up as well, that really puts them in a serious situation from a linebacker standpoint in terms of just A, not having the depth, and B, not having your most dynamic player on the field.
And Matthew, you talk about what a difference it made when he left the game the other night against the Philadelphia Eagles. It seems like the entire defense collapsed.
It did. It did seem to. It did seem to go that way. I think the Eagles made some adjustments as well in that regard. But yeah, when Lee did step off the field in the third quarter, it did seem like there was some. It just seemed to discombobulate things from a defensive standpoint. It didn't seem like they adjusted well to having Anthony Hitchens in the middle and Rolando McClain. They kind of switched those two guys out. It just didn't seem like things were working the way that they had been previously. It's unfortunate. I mean, I think we all know how talented Sean Lee is football wise. I mean, we know the difference he can make on this defense. We know what this defense is like when he's in the middle or on the weak side, calling signals and making the kinds of plays we're used to seeing him make. But it makes a huge difference when he's not on the field. He is their best defensive player. We've been saying that for 3 years now. The problem has always been, can he stay healthy enough, whether he's in the middle or as a weak side linebacker, to be effective for them in a 16-game season.
And then you mentioned the guy that came in after him was Anthony Hitchens, who got hurt almost immediately after he came in to replace Sean Lee. What's his status for this weekend?
Well, right now, he has not practiced this week, and for that matter, neither has Sean Lee. So their status is very much up in the air. The Cowboys are the type of team where they like to see their guys practice at least once during the week, even if it's on a limited basis, as they try to assess them for the next game. So the fact that they have not practiced yet Wednesday or Thursday, that's concerning. Hitchens has an ankle injury. Depending on the severity of it, it could be one of those things they could tape up and let him play with on Sunday. But with Lee, he's got to get the clearance before he can even consider playing on Sunday. So both of them, neither one of them have practiced, and we'll see if they practice on Friday.
All right, now I'm passing on a question that I deal with when I do talk radio, and people are asking, why is it that the opposing team seems to be able to get pressure on the Cowboys quarterback, but the Cowboys defense seems to be getting no pressure on any quarterback right now? And of course, they're alluding to Rod Marinelli. So explain his role in this and why the Cowboys this year are not able to get pressure on quarterback.
I watched all 16 games last year like you did. I watched all 8 games this year like you have, and I don't see a lot of difference, honestly, in the way that they're scheming or trying to rush the passer. I don't see a lot of difference in what he's doing in terms of how he's deploying guys. I would say that, they may not be blitzing quite as much as they were last year because they are, I think, hopeful that they're going to get more pressure out of those front 4 guys. It's really hard when you watch games to put your finger on it because, I've seen, Rod's defenses before. Rod's defenses are, in fact, a product of Monty Kiffin's defenses, which I've also seen. And there's not a lot of difference in what they're doing from a scheme standpoint. So when the schemes are the same, you're looking at execution, which is your defensive guys. Are they winning the one-on-one battles we talked about earlier? And B, what are the opposing teams doing as well in terms of scheming? The Cowboys didn't get a lot of sacks last year, but they did get quite a bit of pressure on the quarterback at times, and especially for teams like Philadelphia, the Giants, and the Redskins, whom the Cowboys will play twice after Thanksgiving. You have a wealth of film to look at and reflect on and make adjustments to. If you kind of notice the sack totals, they didn't do a very good job of getting to the quarterback against against Philadelphia. They had difficulty getting pressure on the quarterback the second time they played the New York Giants. So, their best pass rush games have been against teams like New England, teams they haven't seen a whole lot of the past few years and haven't seen a whole lot of them. So they don't have nearly as much film study to go by as teams like the Giants and the Eagles do. And I think that plays a role. I think when you see a team twice a year in your division, I think there's some familiarity there that can play a role in how successful or how unsuccessful you are in getting to the quarterback.
All right, so let me ask you this. There is one big question there you talked about. You've watched Rod Marinelli defenses for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the blitzing issue. You're not getting pressure with your defensive front, so why not just blitz the house? Why not do what Philadelphia does a lot of times, or
Well,
the old Eagles defense, where you just send everybody?
well, that goes back to scheme, and that goes back to the cover two scheme. And admittedly, Rod has made a lot of adjustments to the cover two scheme, the way they play it in Dallas. The biggest being, we've talked about this in the past, the fact that they use a lot more man-to-man defense with their cornerbacks because that's what they're better at. The cover two, you're trying to get a pass rush out of four guys. Now it isn't to say that Rod Marinelli hasn't used the blitz this year. He has used it. It's not like a Pittsburgh 3-4. It's not like a Rex Ryan or a Rob Ryan defense where you're really looking to try and send five or six different guys every single time there's a passing down. The cover two is sort of an aggressive pre-vet defense, I guess would be the best way of putting it. It functions best when you're getting a four-man pass rush and you've got seven guys back to defend the pass. So when you look at the kind of pressure they're getting on the quarterback or the lack of pressure, I think the fact that they haven't blitzed as much as I think some folks would like them to, I think it's a product primarily of the type of defense Rod Marinelli wants to play. For better or for worse, those are the kinds of signals and the kinds of schemes that he's calling right now. I know we went through this a couple years ago with Monty calling the defenses. They didn't blitz a lot that year either. I feel like Rod Marinelli is the type of coordinator who will adjust better to that. But to this point, I don't think they've adjusted nearly enough in terms of trying to blitz the quarterback. And I think, I sometimes wonder if we've talked about the fact that we kind of felt like the offense has been a little bit too conservative in these few weeks without Tony Romo. I wonder if some of that mindset has permeated over to the defensive side of the football as well, because nobody wants to be the one that's going to give up the points that are going to lose the game, especially when your margin for error without Tony Romo is so small.
Okay, and let's get back to Sean Lee for just a moment. That's two concussions now in 4 weeks? At what point do you have to start worrying about Sean Lee's career over whether Sean Lee gets back on the field or not?
I think at this point you have to start having some level of concern because most doctors will tell you, any doctor that I've talked to about concussions will tell you that if you have a concussion once, and I've actually had a concussion once, had one when I was 13 years old. It was undiagnosed, and I feel very certain that I had a concussion. If you have one concussion and you bounce back and you don't get another concussion, you're usually okay. But if you get a second concussion, especially one in such close proximity to your first one, the odds of you becoming a habitual concussion sufferer or victim goes up exponentially from that point forward. So the fact that Lee has had a couple of concussions within a 4 to 6 week period, I think that's something the Cowboys have to be very concerned about. They have a lot invested in Sean Lee as a player. Sean Lee is the type of guy who's, when he's healthy, he plays at a level that is phenomenal. He plays with an energy that is phenomenal. And, if you saw the Rangers teams in the 90s and you saw Rusty Greer play baseball, that's kind of the way Sean Lee plays football. There's a level of abandon to it that, from a cinematic standpoint, for lack of a better word, is great. But the way that he flings his body around, it can lead to these types of injuries. So, I have a hunch the Cowboys have, they're monitoring all their players closely, just like anybody in the NFL for these sorts of things. But, Lee is going to bear extra monitoring because of the multiple concussions in a short period of time and because of the way he plays. It's something that, the Cowboys are just going to have to keep an eye on, as well as Lee. And it is something that, frankly, could curtail his career if it becomes a situation like a Merrill Hodge 20 years ago when he had 5 or 6 concussions in a season, and he finally, had finally decided he had to hang it up.
Where's Randy Gregory been?
He's been around, not exactly getting to the quarterback, but he's been around. He seems to be suffering from the same malaise as everybody else in this defensive line, aside from Greg Hardy. They just can't seem to get to the quarterback. I don't see anything in the way they're playing that to me questions their level of effort. It's just, I've harped on it a few times. Greg Hardy siphons off players and allows them to handle one-on-one matchups. You've got to find a way to win those one-on-one matchups, and they're simply not doing it right now. And Randy Gregory is included in that.
You'll notice that I've basically pointed all my questions towards the defense because the offense, he really didn't have much to quarrel with this past week with a 300-yard passer, a 100-yard rusher, and 2 100-yard receivers. So are we to believe now that the Cowboys offense is fixed, or was that just because they were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who aren't particularly great on defense? What's your take on this Cowboys offense now as we have gone through this 6-game losing streak, finally seeming to find their way?
I wouldn't call them fixed, but I would say that Cowboys fans should be highly encouraged going into this game on Sunday because, as you said, obviously the 3 major skill positions on the offensive side of the football were very productive. But really, more importantly, if you watch that game for the most part, that offense passed the eye test. That offense looked better than it has looked at any point in time since Tony Romo went on the shelf. And Matt Castle looked like he was firmly in command of the offense and the playbook, had good chemistry with Cole Beasley, got the football to Des Bryant in situations where Bryant could make plays. Darren McFadden looks absolutely at home in this offense. It's really kind of scary, and it kind of makes you wish the Cowboys had maybe given him more opportunities earlier in the season because his last 3 games have been perhaps the best 3-game stretch of his entire career, taking advantage of an above one of the best offensive lines in football, and just his great running style, a one-cut style with a long stride and a great acceleration that really fits well into this offense.
Is the reason for that just because he played on such a bad football team with the Oakland Raiders for so many years, and he's finally in a situation now where he's got, a supporting cast, or what is it about Darren McFadden now that is making the difference?
Well, I think that is a big part of it. I mean, those teams in Oakland were just anywhere from below average to terrible. I mean, there's no way around it. He got hitched to a bad franchise for a long time. You come to Dallas and all of a sudden you have these pieces around you, and that certainly helps make you better. But I think the other big piece of it, and this is the scary piece. This is the piece we've talked about several times. He's healthy. He has had habitual hamstring injuries in his football career. He's had a few other serious injuries, but the hamstring's been the big thing. That's the thing that when you talk about him being on the field on a consistent basis, that's been the thing that has hurt him more than anything else personally. He's only played 16 games in the season one time. And, the Cowboys, I think, have pretty much committed to giving Darren McFadden 25 to 30 touches a game, part of it because they really don't have anything behind him. So, you kind of got your fingers crossed if you're a Cowboys fan that Darren McFadden's going to stay healthy the rest of the season, not pop a hamstring. And then he might end up, meeting the prediction I think I had for him at the beginning of the season, which I think was 800 or 900 rushing yards and half a dozen touchdowns. He might actually meet that by the end of the season at the rate he's going. He might even surpass it. He's only had 1,000-yard rushing season. If he can keep this pace up, he could have a second.
When we get right down to it, we've listened for so many years to the people who hated Tony Romo and talked about what a bum he was and what a worthless quarterback he was and how the Cowboys were never going to win anything with him. What do you think these Cowboys fans are learning about Tony Romo now in his absence?
That he that he's the straw that stirs the drink, frankly. You know, this is a completely different team without him. You know, I have told people for years, you know, I don't consider him to be an elite quarterback, but he is an above average quarterback. I think he's among the top 10 quarterbacks in the league right now. And, you know, when he is on the field, this team is infinitely better. It is far more likely to stay in football games, to be more productive, and he has that special little something that only a handful of quarterbacks have, and that's that ability to bring his team back from a deficit late in the game, and more often than not make the right throw. It's not that he hasn't made mistakes; he certainly has in key situations, but more often than not, he's able to lead his team to a win. Um, you know, I saw a Facebook post from a friend of mine today. He was basically just saying, blow the team up at this point. You know, trade Tony Romo, trade Des Bryant. I'm sick of all this mess. And, you know, I would remind anybody thinking of that, Quincy Carter, Chad Hutchinson, Drew Henson, Ryan Leaf, the parade of imposters that Jerry Jones brought in between the retirement of Troy Aikman and the magical way they found Tony Romo as an undrafted free agent. The grass is not always greener on the other side. And yes, Romo is hurt, and yes, he is 35, and yes, the Cowboys do need to start thinking about life without Tony Romo. But right now, this quarterback is their best opportunity to win football games, whether it's, you know, trying to get to a Super Bowl or just trying to salvage a lost season as they seem to be right now.
And the only thing I would quarrel with you on this, Matthew, is I do believe he's an elite quarterback whose timing was very bad. He spent most of his career with an extremely bad football team, and when they finally put players around him, he showed his value, and now you see how valuable he is in his absence, just how bad this football team has become since that time. So I think that Tony Romo is vastly underrated. Unfortunately, there are a lot of guys out there like that. You know, Philip Rivers is a guy like that. I think Tony Romo is every bit as good as a Philip Rivers. But just, you know, the circumstances and timing of things just didn't work out for him and may never work out for him. But regardless of that, there's no question that this team went into the toilet when he left. And they brought Des Bryant back. He came back. They've gotten their offense seemingly straightened out, but their defense stinks now. I mean, Romo really, I think that he's been so undervalued that now I think maybe finally people will appreciate just how good he is. And I don't know if you heard any of that or not. That's what I was afraid of.
I didn't hear much of it. I heard Philip Rivers, and
All right. And now I'm breaking
people
up.
will
So,
say, you know, I do think to some degree Romo and Rivers have had a similar career track, and
okay.
they've been with teams that generally have underachieved. But at least Rivers has been to a championship game, an AFC championship game, whereas Romo has still not even tasted that yet. And you can't win, you know, Super Bowls like the Patriots do without having a good team around you. It's just not possible. But I think that this stretch has certainly, I think, I hope to anyone who has been watching this team for a long time, you know, certainly underscores the value that Tony Romo has to this franchise. It's just, you know, sometimes quarterbacks get hurt. And if you want to talk about not having a competent backup quarterback, backup, then talk to
All
the
right,
gentleman
ultimately,
who
as we
thinks that
wrap
Greg
this
Hardy
thing
is a
up,
leader.
because it seems like we're starting to run out of good luck here, tell me what you think's got to happen for the Cowboys to beat these Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend. Can they do it? Did you hear what I said? Okay. We're having difficulties right now. Okay, Matthew, you with me now? Are you with me now? Can you hear me? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, good. All right, we rebooted. Because we're obviously running out of luck
There we go.
here.
I can see you now.
Let's wrap this up with one question. What can the Cowboys beat this Tampa Bay team this weekend on the road? Is there any evidence there that tells you that they can beat this team and finally snap this 6-game losing streak?
Well, I think you just asked me if I think the Cowboys can win on Sunday, and I think they can. I think it's going to depend on a couple of things. The way their offense looked against Philadelphia, I think they have the capability of actually overwhelming Tampa Bay to some degree, just because their defense isn't that good. But I think it really boils down to what we talked about earlier with the pass rush, talking about how Cowboys have had a lot of trouble getting to the quarterback in recent weeks. This would be a great week for them to get off of that tip and start getting toward Jameis Winston, because in the performances with Jameis Winston this year, when you've put guys in his face and you force him to make before he wants to make them, he's made mistakes, and that's led his team to losses. So like any rookie quarterback, the real key is putting him under duress and getting him off schedule and making him make decisions before he wants to. So if the Cowboys can do that, plus they can combine the offensive effort they had against Philadelphia last week, I think they beat Tampa Bay on Sunday. I'm not picking them because I can't they win a game. They have to show me they can win a game for me to pick them in my first and 10 column. But I will say that there's some good momentum, even with this loss to Philadelphia. There's some good momentum offensively, and good opportunities for them to finally get off
of the last thing I'm going to ask you
the
is,
schneid
do the
and break that
Cowboys need to
6-game
just go
losing
ahead
streak.
and kiss the playoffs goodbye this year? I don't think you heard me. Are you there? Okay. Okay. Can the Cowboys? Do the Cowboys just need to
No,
kiss the playoffs
yeah, I'm here.
goodbye
I just
this
didn't
year?
hear you. I don't think they're a playoff team this year. I don't think that they have enough time to make the necessary ground. For them to be over 500, they'd have to go 7-1 to end the season. Carolina, Green Bay, Buffalo, 2 games against the Redskins. I just don't. I don't see it. I think at best they're an 8-8 team. It's unfortunate because they did have a lot of talent coming into the season, and there was a good opportunity for them earlier in the year with a full roster to make some noise and get themselves in a good position in the division. But I don't think there's enough there, even with Romo coming back theoretically next week, for them to do for them to do what they do to win the division. And you should know this: the Cowboys have never finished a season 7-1. It would be unprecedented.
One more time. Are you still with me? Can you hear me one more time? Okay. Apparently you can't. All right. Well. Okay, Matthew. One last thing. What's coming up on Rattle and Hum
Yeah, I'm
Sports
here.
website?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, what's coming up on the website here in the next couple of days?
Column will be up this weekend, along with uh, players to watch for the Tampa Bay game, and of course, you and I are talking probably um, to Baton Rouge this weekend.
All right, very good. Matthew, apologize for the late breakup here, but I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We appreciate your time as always. We look forward to talking to you after the Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play this weekend, and we look forward to reading your stuff on Rattle and Hum Sports. Okay? Very good. Thank you very much. Matthew Postins covering the Cowboys for Rattle and Hum Sports. I'm Bryan Houston. Thanks very much for watching tonight. You can see this and other Rattle and Hum Sports Spreecasts on www.rnhsports.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.